who feels like they know more about Belize than just about any other country on earth besides the one that you live in, and maybe not even that. But yeah, thank you, John, for that very thorough overview. And this is why really I was excited for you guys to hear this. Having been in the vacation rental business and on a daily basis, pulling out of my garage and seeing somebody else getting up and going for a morning walk or off to the farmer's market, and knowing that that person had come to stay with us, because for them to pay $200 a night at a vacation rental with 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, a kitchen, and a free parking spot, made a lot more sense than to get a room at the Marriott or at the Hilton for $300 a night. And so we decided to share what we had found via a fund. And so we wanted to pull together some private capital from other folks who were like-minded and understood the rationale behind the investment. So what we said is, you know what, we don't know which of these product types is going to perform better. Honestly, I have no idea if it's going to be more divers and lovers on their honeymoon staying in the garden cottage and all they want is just a room and go out every night, or is it going to be people like my family and I who want a bunk room and want a kitchen and want the ability to cook, because this doesn't exist. And I wish I had my laptop here because I would do a live search for you guys on Orbitz, looking for a room in Ambergris Caye and show you what the results are. But I encourage you to do that on your own at home. So not knowing which of the configurations were going to be the most popular, decided to just get one of each in our fund. So we're raising a total of $1.8 million, and that represents all of the capital necessary to acquire the lots, which our partnership, our LLC, will own, build the structures, and make sure that we have enough operating expenses for all the other things that go into a project like this. Things like insurance, paying the HOA, utilities, all that laundry list of stuff, which maybe we could go over if you're interested at a later date. I don't want to bore you with the details. The participation details are very simple. It's a min-max fund, meaning we're going to raise as much as we can, and as we do, we will close on each lot in tandem. The expectation is fully that the fund will be fully subscribed soon, and that possibly another one will commence after that. There's a $50K minimum investment just to keep the numbers nice and whole, and the amount of investors, sort of condensed to a group of folks that makes sense. It's open to all investors, and there's a 1-week personal use component for those who qualify. So, and Michael maybe will speak a little bit to this, but how many of your stocks and bonds or mutual funds right now give you a week in paradise? That's part of the deal for investing in them. So we wanted to add that component because we think it's really important for people who, it's not 100% critical, it's not necessary to visit or like or buy in to paradise in order for it to make sense financially, but we thought it'd be cool to offer people something unique where they could have that personal element of enjoyment. This little cylinder here represents sort of the current fund commitment level to date. It's a little bit over half subscribed, and things are picking up quickly as we come into the winter months now. So this is what the project looked like when John and I first met, and we said, hey, we're really interested in buying into this project. So as you all know, the fewer people that are able to really envision the vision, the lower the price. And so we looked at this piece of dirt and we said, hey, this is a project with enormous scale potential. This is the only piece of land on the island that's been the #1 island in TripAdvisor 2 years in a row that has the capability to be a full-blown hotel. And when I approached John, I said, hey, I'm interested in buying my own lot, but I'm also interested in one day bringing in like-minded folks to be able to do the same thing and participate. But what I'd like to do is to reserve my lots at the dirt pricing. I don't want to wait until the flat screen TV is in and the sales center and all the fancy stuff. I want to buy mine now. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to take us to do the fund, but I'd like to reserve at that level. And so that's what we did. By virtue of purchasing our own lot and putting down a little bit of extra commitment, we were able to secure pricing that was highly favorable. And I don't know, John, can you comment at all on sort of what the perceived or realized equity at this point would be if I were to get off the plane tomorrow and come into your office and say, you know, I'd like to buy a cottage? What's the difference between?
It's very easy to substantiate the value difference. At the time that he initially involved himself in the project, he was able to secure a price for his fund in these three lots. It's about, depending on which lot configuration, it's anywhere from 17 to 19% discount off of the current pricing that the development is selling at. So for the participants in the fund, there's a term called phased equity, and phased equity refers to the bound equity that occurs through natural price increases that you have for the development project. In this particular case, the bound equity or the phased equity actually takes place right at the outset, because frankly the financial commitment that Danny had made by way of options and optioning lots at a lower price point mitigated the risk for the investors, because the investors have the benefit of the higher return at the lower price. They're able to participate at the point that there's 80 units sold as opposed to no units sold or constructed. So there's about somewhere between a 17 and 19% gain in equity for the participants of this first fund. So as Danny mentioned, there will be a second syndication opportunity after this one. It won't be at the same price, so it's something to keep in mind. Participation in the first syndication because of that.
So going into this, you know, I'm the son of a Russian immigrant. I guess I'm a Russian immigrant myself. So I am highly skeptical, especially of smooth talking real estate broker type guys. And so I said, you know what, I can build a model. I have a financial model that we use for our vacation rentals, and it happens to work out nicely because I can just plug and play some assumptions. And now remember, guys, the goal of this fund is a buy and hold strategy. The goal is cash flow. It's an income generating investment. The growth that John just talked about is a cherry on top. The goal was to buy undervalued land, and we think we've done that based on the price that people are paying getting off the plane today versus a year ago. But really, the model, in order for it to stand on its own legs, has to function underneath the assumptions that we plug into it. And so what we assumed before we get to the returns on the next page is that for 6 months out of the year, the little monopoly houses are only going to be 50% occupied. And we're going to call that low season, value season. And in value season, people are going to pay $165 a night for the keeping suite all the way, and the garden cottages. And for the family cottage, $295 a night. For the other months, we kind of broke it up into two different categories. We called high season the months between November and April, the 5 months classically defined as high season, which have now expanded probably another month and a half to 2 months, maybe on either side almost, more on the tail end side. But we said, okay, we're only going to get 75% occupancy for those 5 months. And for 1 month out of the year, 4 distinct weeks, every single cottage, every single hotel room is going to be full. And the peak season?
Yeah, when are
those weeks? Yeah, so again, November to April, high season. Peak season would be the 4 weeks represented by Thanksgiving, Christmas, essentially around Easter and New Year's. So again, really wish I had a laptop here so I could do a live demo for you guys, but maybe you could speak, John, just to the reality. How do these numbers compare to what we're seeing on the ground right now?
We regularly, our office regularly conducts surveys of all of the resorts, condo developments, all the hotel management on the island. As recently as 2 weeks ago, almost every property in the island is sold out through the end of March. Most properties told us that the next week of availability happens in April. What Danny shows here on the board is what we put together as the initial assumptions a year ago in terms of what was historically the 3 seasons: value season, high season, peak season. The value season was half of the year, and the other half of the year was high season or the holidays, if you will. But what's happened in the marketplace is that because the occupancies have been so high, occupancy is typically above 90% throughout all of high season, that people have had to move their vacation, if you will, other times of the year. And BTB has spent a large amount of their advertising and marketing budget on attracting people from Texas, from Florida, from Arizona, from states where people are looking to travel in the summer months, as opposed to those in the Mid-Atlantic and New England region who are wanting to get out of the winter cold. And so our high season
Can you pull up a browser?
Right through the summer months. In fact, the last 2 years, we maintained high season occupancy up until August 15th. And our low season has really been from August 15th until mid-November. We have a 3 month, actually, I'm sorry, just about a 2.5 month value season, if you will. Historically, your top resorts on the island would run at 85 to 95% occupancy, but across the board, I was not able to find a property that last year ran below 85% occupancy.
There's a lot to do.
But they're extremely conservative, and it's for 2 reasons.
They won't hear me, right?
As a real estate syndicator, as Danny is, you obviously always want to under-promise and over-deliver. But quite frankly, if we plug in the actual numbers of what the market is doing today, then the returns would show at such a high percentage that it would actually cause you to question the credibility of the model itself. So it's more realistic, or I guess I should say more palatable, to provide an extremely conservative projection because the numbers make sense and are within the realm of what people can comprehend. But quite frankly, we've reached a point in the market. My biggest concern, people ask me what keeps me up at night in terms of what potential problems there are. The problem we're facing right now today is that anything above 90% occupancy is the same as 100%. I'll explain that real briefly. Anytime you allow people the flexibility of booking their own room, if you have a 7-day booking and then you have a 1-day gap before you have another 7-day booking, well, that 1 day of vacancy is 3.3% vacancy on a 30-day month. So if you just have 3 single days of vacancy throughout the month, you're down at 93%. And because the entire island is running above 90% occupancy, what I can't track and measure is how many people are we actually turning away. We're booking flights to Belize, but can't come to a market that can don't have sufficient.
So yeah, the question was, how does the price per night compare to other?
Great question.
Can-
That's the other assumption that we've heard on the side of
So-
caution. So to give you, well, actually,
Can we-
I'll let Danny go.
Yeah. So just to show you guys that none of this is staged and there's no magic in all this, we'll do a live demo on Kayak. So here we've just entered San Pedro Belize, and we want to check in a month from now. We'd like to just stay for 4 nights or so. Can you just hit find, Pete? Hopefully people watching at home can see this as well. And then let's just go over here and say that we want to be, I don't know, a mile from town, because a lot of the other hotels are more remote. You got to get there by boat. There's no paved road, and I don't really want to stay in a 0-star or a 2-star. So, okay, so there we go. And then, are these sorted by? Yeah. So we have 9 out of 84 hotels. Why don't we go ahead and just sort by price to answer Danny's, very, by price. Well, let's go low to high. Let's see our competition first. Okay. So.
Belize Huts is a hostel. In all seriousness, it is an excellent. They're shared bathrooms.
Yep. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about Royal Caribbean Resort and Caribe Island Resort?
Yeah, Caribe Island Resort has 12 condos. It's not professionally managed, but
yeah, they can't hear you. You got to talk. It's okay. There's the USB.
So just real quickly, Belize Huts is a youth hostel. Caribe Island Resort has 12 condos, and it is not professionally managed. It does not have a website. It's but obviously they're here on Kayak. Royal Caribbean Resort is a property that you can see there that the 27 reviews rated as good, as opposed to, I guess, Belize Huts is okay, which okay must be less than good. So Royal Caribbean Resort is kind of an anomaly. It's small cottages. There's no amenities or services on the property. There's no restaurant, and there's no swimming pool. And so that's kind of the entry level at $105. So it does have availability. So we could book a room there. We could book a room at Caribe Island Resort, and then we jump up to, if we scroll down from there, we've got the villas at Banyan Bay at $275, and then we're up at $400, and then that's all the availability. If we go to the other pages, we would see that we would have call, meaning that there's no inventory available.
Can you scroll back up just one second? So I just wanted to call your attention to a couple things. So we've actually stayed at the villas at Banyan Bay. It's okay. It was probably built in the 80s, individually owned and managed. So one unit might not be the same as the next unit. But what's really striking to me is look at the range, right? I mean, 120 to 275. So the whole sweet spot is missing, right? I mean, when people go on vacation, they want to spend predominantly in the $200 a night range-ish. And for an island like Ambergris Caye, you should reasonably expect to be able to get something, say, decent to nice for $200 a night. But that doesn't exist here anywhere in this range. And well, how many stars will the project be? Well, I mean, that's all dependent on reviews from the guests, right? So those are guest reviews, right? I mean, we're striving for 5 stars, obviously, but I guess so can we go? Do you want to talk any more about this? So can you flip back to the presentation? So the reason I bring this up is just so that we can do an independent, objective validation of the assumptions, right? Can we get $195 a night for a place that looks like what John showed you, right? The James Bond meets Ralph Lauren studio. And so if you saw a little thumbnail image of that in the results list and it said $195 or $200, would that be interesting enough to at least click on and read more about the resort? And once you read more about the resort, that's where you'll find me. Once you read more about the resort, you'll find out that, no, can you go back to the other presentation? Sorry. Poor Pete. Yeah. Canal. Yeah. Every single building you see there has islands that are driven back. So just going back to the conservative assumptions, let's go back to one. I'm a sort of, glass is half empty kind of guy. So I really wanted to see what would be the absolute worst case, because if you average these 3 numbers out, 50%, 75%, and 100% over the course of 12 months, that averages out to about 64.5%. So if you accept that the average annual occupancy on an island that's been #1 on TripAdvisor for 2 years in a row is 64.5%, and you accept that these prices are fair, right? So with garden cottages, here's that 185. Okay, so let's say that next month falls into the high season column. Okay, and we're going to get 185 a night. So if you accept all that, then the model spits out the returns that you're going to see on the next page. But again, so we don't have the ability to run a live kind of scenario analysis, but what I did is actually ran a much worse scenario and said, well, what if all these averages out to only 50%? And for the entire year, we only have a guest staying 1 out of every night. So in other words, we're an anomaly, right? We are an outlier from what's going on in every other hotel on the market. And what ended up happening was that the returns came back right around 9.6% annually. So just very quickly here, again, how these numbers are all derived in terms of the top line income, all of the expenses, the operating cash flow. We can either, hopefully you all have read in the prospectus, or we can certainly get you those numbers. But you know, these are the types of returns based on the extremely conservative, the under-promising and over-delivering spirit that this is done in, that we would hope to see. Now, in year 2, you can imagine that the early years are depressed artificially in the model, because that's what really happens is when you open up a hotel, when you open up a new building, there's always a stabilization period. It's not going to be 85% booked on average the minute that we open the doors, right? So there is a ramp up period, and the 5-year average return includes that ramp up period. So if you did a 5 to 10 year pro forma, it would obviously look much healthier because the numbers wouldn't be held down by those initial stabilization years. So just really quickly, I want to introduce Michael McNair as a trust officer at IRA Services, because, you know, for a lot of us in the room, my wife and myself included, we looked at this and said, hey, you know, I don't have 600 grand to buy an entire lot. I got like 42 bucks in my pocket and a little bit of money in the bank. But through that 18-month due diligence process, what I learned is a very little known fact, which is that the IRS doesn't actually care what you use to invest your IRA or retirement money in, as long as it meets a very, very short, or as long as it doesn't violate a very short list of prohibited transactions, of which real estate is not one of them. And so if you don't have the liquidity, if you don't have the immediate cash or capital, you know, what is one to do?